Welcome to the Social Media Church podcast. I'm Neil Smith, joined by my co-host and good friend, Aaron Magnuson. Aaron, the Texan. Aaron, it's good to be with you.
I am a Texan now, and we are good friends. And we're both wearing trucker hats at the moment.
It is that. So it's winter time, and so it's not the season. For hats,
if you're watching on YouTube, you can check out our trucker hats together.
Yes. Yes. I'm in hat mode right now, Aaron. Yeah. I've been, I think it's maybe winter time or.
Yeah, you've been sledding over the weekend.
Was sledding over the weekend, but yeah, I'm in full hat mode. And I've been like buying hats. I just bought one of the, I forget what the new like style is, but it's like the blocked hats. But
ooh, anyways, I've not heard of that.
So
I'm gonna have to Google that.
Who's one of my favorite YouTubers, just put out some merch, and he had a hat style that I've been eyeing, and I was like, oh, that gives me an excuse to buy one of those hats.
Absolutely.
So, I though, Aaron, have a question for you, personal question. Okay. We're going to talk in this episode of the podcast about our recommended focus social networks, apps for churches to focus on this year. So we want to talk about that. But I got a personal question. We are less than 2 weeks away from Super Bowl. Ooh. I've noticed on your Instagram that you've got a good friend in the Super Bowl.
I do.
Can you talk about that? How in the world are you?
Yeah.
Where did this relationship come from?
That's true. It is almost the Super Bowl. I'm glad you're going here because I am remaining a LA Rams fan in Dallas. Grew up a Broncos fan because in Oregon we don't have a professional sports team. My dad lived in Denver, just brought that culture to our house. We grew up Denver fans, and then when we moved to LA, I was like, well, my first city, might as well take the team here. And I was not going to be a Chargers fan. They can leave LA. But the Rams.
This is news to me. I didn't know you sold out on the Broncos. So you're no longer a Broncos guy.
And I wouldn't say no longer. Like they would come second. So like I'm a Broncos supporter. I'm in too deep, too many tears lost, too much vested interest in the Broncos to not still care. But if the Rams and the Broncos are playing, I cheer for the Rams. So every weekend, my dad and my brother, we have a group chat going. That's how we stay connected. They are still very much Broncos fans, but they'll be cheering for the Rams. They're happy that the Rams are there. So part of the reason that we're Rams fans is because my wife could not care less about football, which is super healthy for me because football was that's my whole life growing up. And so even though my wife was a Division I athlete, almost, if she would have stayed on her course, she would have played in the Olympics for volleyball, all of those things. She just doesn't like watching sports. So she's an athlete herself, only wants to play it, but she has a tiny bit of vested interest when she knows somebody. And so we both graduated from Oregon State University. And so at the time of 2016, we were watching Hard Knocks. The Rams were on Hard Knocks because they had just moved to LA. We were still living in Oregon at this point, but I had 3 former teammates on the team. Johnny Hekker, who's the highest paid punter in the NFL, Brandon Cooks, who you care about now because he's with the Texans, and at the time, the backup quarterback, who's now in Minnesota, Sean Mannion. And so Megan was like, I'll watch this. And then Amazon Prime came out with their version after Hard Knocks. So we followed the whole 2016 Rams team. And so when we moved down to LA, Megan, if she cared about football at all, it would be the Rams. And so I was like, you know what? I heard a Bob Goff quote one time talking about the more things you can have in common with your spouse, the healthier that's going to be. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to punt on the Broncos. We're going to be, because we can actually talk about at least a little bit more than we would before the Rams. So became a Rams fan, and now they're in the Super Bowl. So Johnny Hekker and I played together in college. And so I have a vested interest in how the Rams do. I was able to see him at training camp, which is kind of fun. Before we left LA, saw him at the beginning of the season, went and watched practice, got to catch up with his family. And so it's just fun watching them go through it and knowing all the sacrifices they made. He had another kid in the off season, and so it was really hard on his wife being a 2-kid household with him being at training camp. And so to see hopefully it pay off in the Super Bowl this year would be really cool. Obviously, he lost to the Patriots a few years ago when he was there. So hopefully we can get it going this year. But I'm just hoping for a good game. I really like Joe Burrow too. So Nils, do you care at all about what's going to happen here?
No, the Joe Burrow story though is just such a good story.
Cool.
And as a Texans fan who's watching my team struggle so bad and having watched the Bengals be so bad for so long, to get a high draft pick, get a QB, and like go from terrible to Super Bowl pretty much overnight. It's just such a great story.
It gives you hope.
At the end of the day, I though, you're giving me reason though to cheer for the Rams. The Rams have had a rough road as well, in many ways, and gotten close and then not. And I think both stories are good stories, but
new blood in the Super Bowl. That's all I care about. Tom Brady's not there. All of those things. So, new things. And so the question now, Nils, I think for 2022 is there new blood in the social media water? Or are we going with a tried and true, like with the Tom Brady's of social media for 2022? You pitched this question. Nils and I have not talked about this yet, so I don't know what he's going to say. I actually had, coincidentally, a really interesting conversation today pertaining to this, loosely pertaining to this. So it's fitting that Nils is like, hey, let's talk about this. But Nils, open it up. New blood in the social media water for 2022, or are we sticking with tried and true?
So I'm going to go tried and true.
Okay.
And I'm going to give an opinion here, and then I want you to give your opinion, and I have some secondary here that I think are important to throw in.
Yes.
And because I'm thinking about this all the time.
Yep.
But I think the most important social network to prioritize in 2022 is YouTube. Now, I have often said YouTube is not a social network. It is a search engine. It is a video platform. And that is true, and it has a social element. But I think if you put it in the category of social networks, I believe the most important digital platform for churches to focus on and continue to develop and prioritize from a social media landscape standpoint, it is YouTube. And it's not just what I'm not saying, and I do think churches should use the community functionality and some of those other things. That's really not the primary use. It's really taking your sermon content and distributing it most effectively on YouTube as a primary distribution platform, as YouTube is something people are watching on their televisions, something they're watching on their phones. It's just so accessible. It's a search engine where people are going to find your church. People are going to easily share it. It's just getting so much engagement. And I think churches have historically thought, if I'm going to be on TV, you've got to be like a mega church. Only a handful of churches going to be on TV, where now every church starts with TV in many ways. And you think about how many people are not engaged on a weekly basis physically in your church body, but yet YouTube creates that opportunity from a worship experience standpoint to create the engagement. And so I just am a believer that if I'm going to put my eggs in one basket in 2022, YouTube is going to be that basket that I'm going to most put the majority of my creative energy, sweat equity, whatever you might say, even advertising resources behind. I think YouTube is the platform to prioritize. That's my opinion.
Okay, I hope some of our listeners are calling you a cheater right now. With I don't know that we can quantify YouTube as social media. So Nils, we're gonna have to circle back on that. But I do appreciate you saying that, because I do think I'm trying to find a way to disagree with you more, Nils. It's really hard to do because you're just such a likable guy. I feel like Jay Cranda was so good at disagreeing with you, and our audience, I feel like would benefit from us disagreeing more. But the truth is, we're just on the same brainwave so often, and YouTube is just like almost a given at this point. Like that's the TV network. And for me, I'm hearing this question and I'm thinking, okay, well, what social network do I want to use to promote my TV network, which is YouTube? And what is the social media platform that's going to drive people to where I actually want them, which is YouTube? So you're not wrong. I think the majority of our effort needs to be put on YouTube, and all of my conversations since hanging out with Shoreline and now being here at Shoreline is predominantly around the weekend service, which is married directly to YouTube, to the point where, and I'm going to get to what I think in a second, but to the point where YouTube, like we're talking about shutting down our, and this is not necessarily for everybody, it's our demographic. We're talking about shutting down Facebook because it's just like we're, in terms of live streaming and just really putting all of the eggs in the basket of of YouTube because it's just a distraction, sideways energy when you have people in different places. Again, for our context, that's not a recommendation, but I'm just saying I'm trying to make a point on the magnitude of YouTube. It kills so many birds with one stone.
Yeah.
It's a search engine. It's a hosting platform for your live weekend services, for on-demand weekend services, for community building. It creates an easy access to getting people into your next steps. If you have a texting system, if you have a Discord server that you want them to go into, wherever you're trying to get your community, YouTube does that so well. But we also want to be directing traffic there via short form, which does happen on the traditional social media platforms. And I would also go tried and true, go with the Tom Brady. I mean, if Tom Brady was in the Super Bowl, I'd be betting on Tom Brady. And I just really believe that the Tom Brady of social medias right now is Instagram. Now, I will say this, and it goes to the conversation that I was having. I don't think I have anything new to say on Instagram, like for all the reasons that we've ever historically said, and because like the widest range of the demographic that attends your church is on Instagram. That is why you should focus most of your attention on Instagram, in my opinion. Now, the reason it's Tom Brady and not Patrick Mahomes, to carry out this football analogy, would be that I do think, even the younger generation, like even Instagram is starting to feel more like Facebook in the sense that, and this is the conversation I was in today, Nils, and I'm curious to hear maybe your thoughts on this. And the person I was talking to is 21. He's a graphic designer for us, very into TikTok, obviously, all of these things. And he's not an Instagram hater by any means. Sam, I'm going to give Sam a shout out. My new buddy, my desk mate, Sam. But what Sam was talking about is he's like, eventually, when all you do is copy the trends, that catches up to you. Even if you can copy it well, which Meta has done historically well for a long time, eventually that catches up with you when you're not creating new things. And I just thought that was a really interesting identification that now even Instagram, they're not creating new things. They're trying to do existing things that other people are doing. They're trying to do it better. And that just, that's a losing game, in my opinion. And so that's kind of like Tom Brady getting older. So yes, tried and true, Instagram, Tom Brady, you still got to be there. The majority of the people are there. It's not a new skill that people have to learn. Be on Reels, be innovating with Instagram, but also be understanding Instagram is aging and it looks more like Tom Brady than it does Patrick Mahomes. But I'm curious your thoughts on just kind of what Sam brought up in a conversation we had today.
Yeah, and that's exactly the thought I had is when I was immediately going to what is the best social network, and I do feel like I cheated on YouTube, but I feel like I had to lead with that because I do think that it's just undervalued still, and I think so many ministries will sometimes feel like I missed the boat on this, and it's old. And it's not. Like, I think that's the beauty of YouTube is it is old in the world of YouTube, in the world of social media, but it isn't aging like MySpace aged or like Facebook aged or like Twitter aged. No. It really is aging and grow and just has grown and grown and grown and grown. And I think it's going to just keep growing. And so I think it's just such a powerful platform in that way. Now, that said, I do think you're kind of in between Instagram and TikTok. Yes. And I think it depends on your audience. It's interesting, though, to your point. I feel like I have often been telling ministries, don't ignore Facebook because it still has good engagement. I kind of feel like now we're almost past that threshold where it's like, okay, maybe it's okay to ignore Facebook because that engagement really is dwindling. Now, I think the advantage to Facebook is groups still. But I just, and I'm looking at my own personal engagement. I'm looking at the engagement of people that I talk to. In many ways, people are going there to get into a specific group, or they're going into Facebook to maybe even check birthdays, or the marketplace. Right. So there's some
marketplace is high,
niches that people are going to Facebook for, but they're not just hanging out on Facebook. Where Instagram and TikTok is where they're killing time and being entertained. Now, the side of TikTok is it's kind of like YouTube from a social standpoint. You're more consuming content. You're not engaging socially with other people. There's a comment thread, but it's not about the social community engagement like you'll find. And that's what Facebook really does in Facebook groups is it's really about community. So there's like a whole diversity of platforms then that I'm I'm really thinking about now of
Totally.
Discord. It's something you and I talk about a lot of. I think
Yes.
Discord has huge possibilities and potential to really
Yes.
build community. Twitter has actually, I think, seen a resurgence. Honestly, we're not in a political season right now. We're about to go into another one in America. But I think it's less political than it was before, where I think people are actually spending more time. You actually see a ton on Instagram where it's screenshotted tweets.
Totally.
And I think you're seeing healthier
That drives me nuts.
community.
Let's pause there for a
Twitter.
second. Does that drive you as nuts as it drives me when people
It
their only feed is just a screenshot of Twitter?
Now, as a social media marketing agency, it makes our world really easy because that's what seems to perform really well. And but yeah, it just seems creatively lazy.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it works, and I think it speaks to that. You know what? Sometimes people just want some simple text, inspiration, and they don't need a fancy motion graphic or even a stylistic meme. They just need the words to cut through and speak to them. And so I think that's where Twitter is kind of like, man, maybe we overcomplicated this a little bit, and we can do ministry on these platforms just by using our words more creatively. And so all that to say, I am in 100% agreement that for the majority of churches and ministries, your primary focus should be Instagram. And I think Instagram is going to keep developing. I've been really curious to see if and when Instagram creates groups, and what that looks like. Now, the way people are working around that is through private Instagram accounts, and they're kind of using that like groups, but that's not really a natural
like in terms
way.
of posting, public posting, and then in the comments section.
Right. So I've got a few private accounts that I follow that people shared with me, and it's kind of how we have these kind of like almost like a private group within Instagram, and only people that are invited to that account can even see that it exists. And so it functions like a Facebook group within Instagram's ecosystem. I think Instagram will just see how people are doing that and kind of create a group experience within their platform based on how they've continued to innovate around Facebook. That's my opinion. That's my guess. We'll see. But I do think TikTok, it should be your second to Instagram. And so I think Instagram needs your creative attention, but I think TikTok is the church's biggest opportunity to grow in 2022. There's a pastor that I work with in Texarkana, and it's not who you would expect to be a huge TikTok pastor. He's probably in his mid-50s, I'm guessing.
Incredible.
And, he's a cowboy, and he's got hundreds of thousands of TikTok views. And it's literally just
what's he doing? What's he doing, Nils?
Just literally, he's not doing anything. They're just cutting his sermon clips and posting it on TikTok.
Oh, so they're not even creating TikTok first.
No, it's chopped off lower thirds, and it's still performing really well. It's not native TikTok trends. It's literally just sermon clips being repurposed to TikTok, and it's getting hundreds of thousands of views. Wow. It's not rocket science.
Totally.
It's doing what we've done on Instagram already and moving that to TikTok.
To TikTok. Right.
We just feel like we have to be, I think we got to do these dance videos, or we're going to catch these trends.
Or that's all we understand it to
be. Bad idea.
Yeah.
But it's like, let's just take the good content we're already creating and put that on TikTok, and then we'll figure out other things to do. So I think if you're not on TikTok in 2022, you need to be on TikTok.
Yes.
And so much is localized too. I think people don't realize that about the algorithm of TikTok is you see a lot of things local from your community. Of the way they're
I did not know this. I didn't know that. We're going to have to do some podcast, Nils, to educate myself on all things TikTok. But yeah, I do agree. 2022. My
wife actually sent me a video, a TikTok about TikTok about churches, where basically this person said, "Hey, youth pastors that are telling your youth not to get on TikTok because it's a bunch of girls in bikinis." It sends you that because of the algorithm, and basically saying, because you're looking at that, that's why it's showing it to you.
Yes.
And that's the way their algorithm works. And so it is not just that. Right. Now, that is there, and that is
Yes.
on Instagram, and that
That's
it was on
everywhere.
Facebook, and
That's
that was
right.
on MySpace.
It was. That's right. Yep. And it was
It's-
on websites.
it's
It was
going
on
to
the
be-
internet when all that came out.
That's
Right?
right.
Yep.
And so, I think at the end of the day, and it's been on Snapchat, I think,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think it's Instagram. I think it's then TikTok. And then I think it's Twitter, Discord, Facebook. I mean, I think it is probably, you can't be everywhere. I think you got to be smart.
Yes.
But yeah, that's
Twitter
kind of my
making
ranking
that
right now.
comeback, and I love that. I love that because Twitter to me it personally feels like the purest social network. Twitter is what social network is supposed to be. If you have an irrelevant voice, it stays irrelevant. If you have a relevant voice, it gets to contribute to the conversation, and your voice can become relevant based on how you socially interact with the rest of the people there. I have always loved Twitter ever since I've been on it, and I'm so glad to see that it is still relevant. Well, I should bring Sam on the podcast, to be honest. He's just a graphic designer, but he was pointing out some accounts that are doing Twitter really well. This was all in our conversation today, so it's really convenient that we had that conversation. But he was talking about accounts that are not churches, but he's like, churches should be using accounts this way. And he was like, what I've noticed is even stuff that happens on TikTok, it gets big once the drama from TikTok, or excuse me, from Twitch. He was talking about how Twitch is dying. He's like, nothing happens on Twitch. It all gets moved to Discord and to Twitter from Twitch. And so I do think that there's a resurgence that's happening because of the pureness of Twitter. There's also just a relevance to the news and those sorts of things. But yeah, figuring out creative ways natively to work Twitter and even Discord. And if you don't know how to do it, what's our classic line? There's somebody in your church that probably does, and they probably don't have facial hair, and you probably wouldn't trust them to drive your car, but they certainly know how to drive your Twitter account. And so, yeah, I just love seeing some of these things that we were maybe 2 years ago talking about as dead. I mean, I actually think I remember the episode that you and Kenny Jang were on this podcast talking about how Twitter is dead. Like it's over. Get off of Twitter, churches. And now here we are in 2022 talking about, hey, you should figure out how to talk better on Twitter. And it could be, and for sure, maybe not your brand account, figure that out. But you as a lead pastor, there's lots of great things that translate well as an individual on Twitter. I'm just excited about 2022.
And two pastors I want to just put out there that I love following on Twitter. Rich Viotis here in New York is just gold.
Number one.
On Twitter, and Derwin Gray, who we've had here on our podcast.
Yes.
Both those guys are putting out such great content.
And they're doing it differently, by the way. So two great different examples. Like they're doing different styles. So you got to feel there. Yeah, go ahead though.
I feel like they resonate with me though in two unique ways. They're both are putting out spiritual nuggets of gold. They both also are sports fans, and so I love listening to them, like Rich during a Knicks game and Derwin during a football game. You know, just watching them, or just on a Sunday afternoon where he's tweeting different things about different football games that are going on and his unique perspective. And so I love that personal side of those leaders. But then at the end of the day, I think they have just mastered the art of the 140 character, gold nugget of ministry.
Totally. So Nils, going back to TikTok, because since that is the up and comer that people are most curious about, I want to spend a little bit more time on there before we wrap this podcast. But the first question that comes to mind is, how is it different than Snap? Is it Snapchat? Has it passed some of those markers where Snapchat just peaked and then it was done? Like, it's not done in terms of like being extinct, but it's done in terms of like, you're not going to see growth there. At least probably the most of our audience is not going to see growth there. How is it different than that, if it is? And then kind of what was that marker, and then what makes it different so that we can trust it and that it is actually something that's worth investing in 2022?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I think we're going to need to have several episodes and get people that really know TikTok well. Now, I'll tell you just some data points that can be a bit deceiving with TikTok. TikTok, even like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, was over 1 billion users, where I think Snapchat never really got past 350 million. So TikTok was already massive. Now, a lot of that is in China. And so you have I think so many of our audience is based in North America.
Yes.
But so you have, you had a kind of a core group that was a part of TikTok even before it became mainstream here in America. But we saw American engagement grow so rapidly, especially during the pandemic. The average time, though, in the app is over an hour on TikTok.
Think about that.
And so
it's like the shortest video content ever, but it's the longest retention rate. Wild.
And it just is the way they built their algorithm to keep you engaged. And I feel like they just learned so much from, there's dating apps of the swipe right or the swipe left. And just like, you just have this behavior of, and I can just, like if you've got 2 minutes, you can do TikTok. If you've got 2 hours, you can do TikTok and you're going to get a lot. And so it really, I think is such a well-engineered app. Now, the big hurt that I think that church leaders had is the question around data and what they're doing with the data. I think those are still unanswered. But I think the question of whether it's going to be shut down in America, like we saw maybe a year ago, or there's some debates of, is this going to get shut down? I think that day has passed.
Okay.
And so I don't think it will get shut down. I do think there are still data questions. Now, I think this is not just TikTok, though. I think this is every social network.
That's right.
I think this is Google. I think this is Amazon. I think this is every tech company is capturing our data and using our data for their business purposes.
100%.
I don't think TikTok is doing anything bad with our data. I think it's part of why their app is so good is they take the data and create a custom experience for me that is unique, unique to me. That's what Google has done. They make a unique search experience for me. And I'm going to keep giving them my data because they make my life easier when I give them data. They use it for my good. And they use it for their own good to make money to sell out.
Can I tell you how Google failed me this weekend, Nils? Just pause here for a second. Yeah. There was a shirt style. I was shopping with Megan. I'm in Dallas now. I got to get this new style figured out. And this church is heavy into fashion. So they're like my wife. They don't care about sports, which is super healthy for me, but I can't keep up in conversation, but I don't want to look like an idiot. And I'm not giving up Crocs either. So that, by the way, that's not looking like an idiot.
I got my Crocs on right now.
Yeah, see, look at, go to YouTube. You can see our trucker hats and Crocs. I'm not wearing Crocs today. I'm wearing some Air Force Ones. But all that to be said, I'm shopping and I can't, there's a certain style that I'm trying to describe to Megan of a shirt that I want. Turns out it's a hipster style shirt. I have a long torso. I hate it when I dry my shirts and there's midriff. It's just awful. You don't want to see anything that's going on under there, right? But so I'm trying to remember it, and I've searched for this before. So I go to Google and I type in men's shirt styles, hoping that they would know me well enough to pitch me. I'm asking to be served up. And they didn't. Yeah. They did not take advantage of that. So I was very frustrated. And Megan goes, and this is what made me think of what you were saying. Megan goes, "You're the only person in America, Aaron, that wanted Google, that is happy that Google knows you so well, and then is disappointed when they don't know you that well." That's what happened to me over the weekend. Google failed me.
Well, you just need to put cameras all in your house now.
That would have helped.
You would see your body.
Then they would know. They would know very quickly. Oh, hipster shirt for that guy. Sweatshirts and hipster shirts.
Maybe they're actually kind of hinting at like maybe you shouldn't go that direction. Man. It looks good on everyone else at Shoreline City. I remember, and as we wrap up this podcast, Shoreline City just celebrated 10 years, which is so special,
huge,
and such a big time for you to be there in the life of the church. But Katie and I were talking about it, and just we were there. It was probably 5-6 years ago that we were there and part of the life of the church. And we felt so old there at church. I was probably, I'm 41 now.
You were in your 30s.
So I would have been 35, 36.
Bro. I'm 30 right now, and it's like, all right, married 8 years, 2 kids, I'm by my coffin today.
And we came from Hillsong. That was a younger church, but it was like next level young at Shoreline City. And so really that we love Shoreline City, love celebrating 10 years. But I know exactly what you're talking about with the style. There is a specific Shoreline City style that I wish I was cool enough to wear and pull off. And so I'm proud of you going
Thank
going
you.
mid
I'm trying. We're going to find out. But I'm not giving my Crocs up.
See.
You guys can.
Don't
guys
give
can
up the Crocs. Hold on to the Crocs.
No. That's right. I need more pairs. So if anybody wants to buy me more pairs, my birthday's coming up. Yeah. Anyways, wrapping up all things TikTok in 2022, and helping you guys on board, as well as continuing best practices, and it's certainly a series on YouTube. But yeah, I agree, Nils. We need to take ground, and there's a great opportunity that we have. And I will say this: even a very young church like Shoreline City, we are still not executing barely at all on TikTok. And so this is very new. This isn't, proven, but we're here for you. Nils is your social media guide. This podcast can guide you on social media to help you figure out the things that you don't know. We can tell you where to jump in. We're going to do all that research for you. And it's going to be a great year. 2022 is going to be a great year for online church, for church on social media, as we continue to take ground all around the world.
Agreed. Well, Aaron, it was fun, and we will have a lot more fun in 2022, a lot more conversations to come, a lot of great interviews ahead. So thanks, everyone, for listening. Stay tuned, and we will have lots more to come in the coming weeks. We'll talk to you soon.